Everyone harbors one or two secrets they'd rather keep hidden. I'm no exception. Back in the day, I was quite the wild child. Losing my parents at 15, I quickly went astray and joined a gang of troublemakers. Thanks to my dad's insistence on teaching me wrestling since childhood, I gained a reputation for overwhelming strength, surpassing even the boys. However, my life in that world came to an end after meeting a certain person. But living such a life inevitably accumulates lingering issues. Now, at 35, my name is Nancy. I live as an ordinary housewife, working at a local supermarket. With my light makeup and quiet demeanor, no one would guess that I once wore flashy makeup and rode around on motorcycles. Yes, I was a member of a delinquent group and even the leader of a ladies' gang. But then I met my husband, Joshua, and everything changed. It all started 10 years ago during a clash with a rival gang when Joshua unexpectedly intervened. That gang used to start fights at every gathering, and one day, a particularly fierce brawl broke out. Joshua joined in to save his brother, a member of the rival gang. As members of both groups fell, Joshua and I were the last ones standing. I even remember Joshua laughing at his mistake, realizing his brother wasn't even there. His dignified appearance somehow struck me, and I found myself speaking to him. "Hey, you're pretty cool. I mean, really, looking like this, you must have some strange tastes. Were you calling out for someone named No? Did you find him?" I asked. "No, it turns out my brother wasn't here," he replied. That's how our slow, private conversation began. Joshua's brother, it seems, was an irredeemable delinquent. Joshua had even taken up boxing to try to reform him. He admitted he couldn't stand to ignore wrongdoing. Through our conversation, we grew close, and over time, it became clear that we had feelings for each other. But back then, Joshua despised delinquents. Despite our mutual attraction, my involvement in the delinquent world prevented our relationship from progressing. Finally, Joshua said that if I left the gang for good, he'd want to be with me. Tired of the senseless fights, I took the opportunity to leave the group. We started dating and got married 5 years later. The group I was part of disbanded, crushed by a rival faction 2 years after. After marrying Joshua, I underwent a complete transformation, evolving into a calm and graceful woman. However, our peaceful life was recently threatened by a certain neighbor, Joshua's sister, Sonia, and her husband. One morning, as I was seeing Joshua off to work, the doorbell rang. Who could that be? I thought, and I decided to check. The next moment, Joshua looked surprised. "It's Sonia," he mentioned, referring to his sister, whom I had met once at a family dinner. "Hey, Joshua, we've moved next door starting today. Please take care of us." "Hello, I'm Tony, Sonia's husband. Well, looking forward to your cooperation," they both greeted, starting off with a disrespectful attitude. But since Sonia was Joshua's sister, I couldn't be too confrontational. We got along well with the in-laws, so I didn't want to cause unnecessary trouble. However, it turned out that Tony was the person who lured Joshua's brother, Noah, into the delinquent world. They both went to the same high school and were a year junior to Joshua. Joshua turned 34 this year, so they must be 33. Sonia, 3 years younger than Joshua, should be 31. "Too bad about your brother, huh, Tony?" Sonia remarked. "I don't care about Noah anymore, even you, Joshua," she continued. Joshua was visibly angry. His brother had passed away due to a fight. Joshua's brother and sister apparently never got along well. Sonia felt neglected in favor of her brother and developed a rivalry, which eventually extended to Joshua as well. Joshua once mentioned how difficult it was to deal with his sister, preferring to focus only on his brother. Like me, Sonia was also a former member of a delinquent group. Unlike her, Noah was forcibly recruited by Tony. Seeing his siblings' transformation, Joshua probably grew even stronger in his sense of justice. As the three of them glared at each other, I spoke up from behind Joshua. "Joshua, you need to leave for work soon." He snapped out of his reverie. "Oh, right." Running away, he muttered, remembering his responsibilities. "I haven't forgotten that you laid hands on me. That was because you attacked Noah. All right, both of you, enough. We're done here." Sonia's words cut through the tension. Joshua left for work, the conflict still unresolved. At the same time, the bell tolling the start of Sonia and her husband's harassment began. An hour after Joshua left for work, the doorbell rang, but when I checked, no one was there. An hour later, there was a loud noise at the entrance, as if something was violently placed there. When I looked, there was a heap of cardboard boxes dumped in front of the door. What's this about? I muttered to myself, but no one was around. So, I decided to ignore it and went back inside. Then, I heard a small popping sound from the balcony. I hurried over and found 3 broken eggs. We live in an apartment on the corner, next to the room Sonia just moved into. This meant the harassment likely came from Sonia's room, as there are no neighbors on one side and it's too high for someone from below. Anger rising, I confronted my next-door neighbors. "Hey, is that you? What do you want, showing up like this?" I demanded. Sonia greeted me with an irritable demeanor. "Is this your idea of a prank, throwing eggs on our balcony?" It had to be Sonia or her husband. The angle only made sense from Sonia's balcony. But Sonia glared at me, replying, "What? Don't be absurd, lady. You got proof we did it. Make false accusations and I'll call the cops." Despite being a former gang member, her reliance on the police in such a situation seemed second-rate to me. "I have no proof, but the way the eggs are scattered, they could only come from your balcony," I asserted, frustration evident in my voice. I struggled to remain calm, but Sonia kept glaring and arguing back. "Proof? That's weak," she scoffed. Then Tony chimed in. Hey, just because you're Joshua's wife doesn't mean you'll get any special treatment." If Sonia was second-rate, Tony's words were no better. He might have thought he was intimidating, but to me, it was not frightening at all. I could feel my old self stirring, but I didn't want to revert to my past. So I played the role of a meek, unassuming woman and said quietly, "Please don't raise your voice." Inwardly, I wanted to deliver a roundhouse kick right then and there to snap that foolish neck. But having reformed after meeting Joshua, I didn't want to throw away all my efforts for something like this. Seeing my reaction, they both burst into laughter in front of me. "Aha, so you're Joshua's wife. I thought you'd be something special, but you're just a dull woman," Sonia sneered. "Weak. Tony was giving you too much credit. At the family dinner, you seemed like a real introvert." Holding back my rising anger, I was told, "Go on, leave," and the door was closed on me. I stood there, staring at the closed door, feeling a mix of frustration and disappointment. I pondered telling Joshua, but I knew that even if he spoke to Sonia, they'd just feign ignorance. It would only result in more harassment and frustration for me, so I decided against it. The next day and the day following, the harassment from Sonia and her husband continued. It always began after Joshua left for work. "Who dumped this garbage at our doorstep? It must be those two," I muttered to myself as I prepared to leave for work at the supermarket. The door got stuck halfway, blocked by a bag of garbage. I reluctantly took it to the disposal area and then headed to work. 5 hours later, I returned home to find something unbelievable. There was a cardboard box in front of the door, arranged like a table. On either side of the box, lit candles were placed, and in the center, a vase with flowers was set on the door. Above, a photo of me, taken who knows when, was stuck. They were mocking me as if I was deceased. Furious, I was about to kick the cardboard away when Joshua called from behind. Startled, I turned around to find Joshua, who had come home from work. "You're an hour early," I exclaimed. "I got off work early today. What's all this?" Joshua was also surprised at the sight in front of the door. We quickly cleaned up the cardboard and candles from the shared hallway and went inside. There, I told Joshua everything that had happened. "It's likely Sonia and her husband, but we don't have any proof. So even if we confront them, they'll just deny it," I explained. After a moment of thought, Joshua had an idea. "Let's buy cameras. One for the balcony and one for the entrance, especially hidden well at the entrance," he suggested. I agreed with Joshua's suggestion. There was a limit to how much more we could endure. We immediately purchased cameras online and had them delivered to Joshua's workplace to avoid suspicion. "For now, we'll just have to endure until the cameras arrive. Then we can retaliate with evidence." "Understood," Joshua said firmly. So, I bore the harassment from Sonia's house for the next couple of days. For most people, endurance means being unable to fight back due to lack of strength or fear. But for me, it was different. I was holding back the urge to retaliate in a world where using force was permissible. I would have already intervened with those two if I could, but not being able to act on it was incredibly frustrating. 3 days later, Joshua came home with the cameras. "Any trouble since?" he asked. "The usual. Today they even threw a fish head onto the balcony," I replied. Let's set up the cameras right away. Put one behind the air conditioning unit on the balcony, aiming at Sonia's balcony. We'll hide another near the fire extinguisher by the entrance. The day after installing the cameras, Sonia's antics started again as Joshua left for work. I monitored everything through a recording app. Sure enough, the two of them began their antics. I silently observed and left for work when it was time. 2 hours into my shift at the supermarket, Sonia lined up at my register. Well, if it isn't my sister-in-law, she said with a tone that made it clear she knew it was me, her demeanor dripping with condescension. I silently scanned the items as Sonia continued. Aren't you a bit cold for a cashier? Shouldn't you be more hospitable? Come on, give me a discount on this. Other customers lined up behind Sonia, watching our interaction with concerned expressions. Hey, I'm not a scarecrow, you know, a middle-aged man in line spoke up to Sonia. Can't you see she's uncomfortable? Sonia whirled around, glaring fiercely. Shut up. It's none of your business, she suddenly yelled at him. The man seemed completely deflated by Sonia's outburst and quietly left the line. I then addressed Sonia for the first time. Ma'am, if you continue to behave inappropriately, I'll have to call security. I spoke in a calm but icy tone, perhaps mindful of the others watching. Sonia retorted, Geez, it's just a joke. So disappointing, and left the store, abandoning her items halfway through the transaction. The other customers stared in astonishment. My anger was just about to boil over when I returned home after work. There was a notice on the door. Useless cashier. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. I ripped off the note in frustration and waited anxiously for Joshua to return. After Joshua got home, we reviewed the footage from the cameras. It clearly recorded Sonia and her husband's misdeeds. Now we can fight back. All right, let's go now. Anger filled Joshua's eyes. When we rang Sonia's doorbell, Tony answered. You two again. What do you want this time? Sonia appeared behind them. What do you want, Joshua? The two of them asked lazily. We finally began our counterattack. You two. As I started to speak, Joshua stopped me and stepped forward. I recounted. Nancy, let me handle this. Sonia and Tony were taken aback as Joshua continued. If you harass us any further, it won't end well for you. Tony retorted. What? You want to fight? Do you even have proof we did anything? Before Tony could finish, Joshua started playing the video saved in the recording app. This is video capturing your wrongdoings. We had to install cameras because your harassment was too much. This silenced the usually talkative pair. Sonia, showing a hint of panic, turned to Tony. Tony, frowning deeply, glared back at us. Damn it, you got us this time. The trouble started from your end, remember? I said with a serious face. Tony retorted, so we settle this with force, huh? Wait there, Joshua. I'm calling someone. Call whoever you want. We'll be ready. Joshua stood firm, undeterred as the situation escalated. Tony desperately pleaded into the phone. William, I need backup now. His tone was completely different from the bravado he showed us, repeatedly begging for help. After hanging up, he turned back to us. Get ready, Willie. The most notorious guy around here is on his way. He smirked at us, convinced of his imminent victory. But relying on someone else's strength showed his true cowardice. Why don't you confront us directly? Joshua challenged. Keep talking. I know your strength well. I called a special guest this time to ensure you both feel real terror. What a pitiful sight it was. No matter how much they threatened, neither Joshua nor I felt any fear. You must be too scared to even speak. The quiet and meek Nancy, right? Sonia taunted me with a condescending tone. 5 minutes later, the much bragged about William arrived. However, he looked surprised when he saw us. William, over here. Long time no see, Joshua greeted him. Sonia and Tony were visibly excited, having high expectations of him. But their expectations were quickly shattered. What's going on here? Indeed, long time no see, Will. My calling him left Sonia and Tony with puzzled expressions. Joshua also greeted him. It's been a while, Will. The couple looked even more confused by this interaction. Confused? Tony asked. What's this? How do you know, William? As Tony spoke with sweat on his forehead, Will looked back and forth between us. I simply said to him, well, let's not do this, okay? Hearing this, an angry Tony retorted, don't joke around, William. Please do something. Sonia and Tony were frantic, unable to grasp the situation. But then Will addressed them. Hey, don't tell me you mess with Nancy. His question left the couple momentarily stunned. So what if we did? Tony answered hesitantly. Furious, Will shouted, "Idiots! Don't you know who you're messing with?" His rebuke left them standing frozen. They clearly had no idea what was going on. Seeing this, I turned to Joshua and said, "Hey, Joshua, I reverted to my old self from 15 years ago, just for now." Instead of Joshua, it was Will who turned and responded, "Nancy, please don't. If you do something to them, it might end up more than just an injury." Will cautioned me. "What, you're giving me orders now?" I replied, taken aback. No, I didn't mean it like that," he quickly clarified. Seeing the special guests they called for help, Sonia and Tony were bewildered. "What's happening here?" Their faces turned pale as Will spoke. "Do you two know about BBN?" he asked. "Yeah, it's famous. It stands for Black Butterfly Nancy, right? The nickname of the former leader of a ladies' group," Sonia confirmed. "That's right, and this lady here is Nancy herself," Will revealed. Sonia and Tony were shocked. "No way, really?" They both lost their bravado in an instant. Continuing, Will said, "Back then, I led another delinquent group, but we were decimated by Nancy's group. She could take down 30 people by herself." Sonia and Tony now looked at me fearfully. It made sense. They had been harassing someone who they thought was inferior, only to find out she was the leader of a ladies' group they themselves had once belonged to. "I didn't know Nancy is practically a legend," Sonia admitted. "We joined the group 6 months after you left," Sonia said, indicating that she and Tony had joined the group half a year after I had left. Will had been scouted by me and stayed in the group even after my departure. And looking after Sonia and Tony as their senior, he left the group just before it was decimated by a rival group. By that time, Tony had taken over as the leader and was the last leader before its downfall. "Before you ruined it, it was an invincible group. You can't match Nancy," Tony proclaimed. "How could this? Tony was increasingly cornered and distressed by Will's revelations. "Well, the group that took you down is now the strongest in New York State. But if Nancy was still active, she would still be the strongest," Will remarked. Sonia and Tony collapsed, their spirits broken. Seeing this, Will turned to me and apologized. "Please forgive them for my sake." Watching Will apologize, Sonia and Tony had completely lost their will to fight. They never imagined their call for help would backfire this way. "All right, but you'll have to settle your dues properly," I glared at the two of them. "For 1 month, you'll clean this apartment and our balcony that you dirtied. If you skip even 1 day, I won't be so forgiving next time." "Okay," Sonia managed to stutter out her agreement, completely intimidated. Tony, unable to speak, just kept nodding frantically. Watching them, Will commented, "No one can really stand up to Nancy." Hearing this, the silent Joshua finally spoke, "But I hate delinquents. If Nancy hadn't reformed, I wouldn't be here." Looking down a bit, Joshua said softly, and I peered up at him. "Don't worry, I won't show that side of me again." Will burst into laughter at this scene, and we all ended up laughing together. Will and Joshua knew each other because the three of us had met after I left the group. We bumped into Will while on a date and had tea together. "Well, now that's settled, why don't you come over for dinner?" I suggested. We three left Sonia and Tony slumped by the entrance and headed to our apartment. Before entering, Joshua added, "Sonia, you're my sister, so I'll let this slide just this once. But there won't be a next time." Watching him, I wondered if he too was hiding the same fighting spirit as us. From that day, the harassment from Sonia and her husband completely stopped. As promised, I continued cleaning our balcony and the common areas of the apartment, though just delinquents doing chores. Other residents sometimes looked at them curiously, but that soon stopped. After a month, Sonia and her husband left the apartment without a word. Even Joshua, their blood relative, didn't know where they went. They probably left feeling awkward about staying in the same place. We had no reason to get involved further and thought they finally made a wise decision. Finally, we had our peaceful life back. Though neighborhood troubles are common, I never thought I'd be directly involved. At least it was resolved amicably. I have a past I'd rather keep hidden. Joshua has kept it secret all this time. I'm not ashamed of all my past, but I have reflected on my mistakes. I just want to cherish my life with Joshua now, and I hope to live without ever showing my true nature to anyone again. That's all I'm thinking about now.